For a decade, Te Tai Hauāuru was a Māori Party stronghold held by its co-leader Dame Tariana Turia. But in 2014, Adrian Rurafe won the electorate back for Labour. Now the Māori Party's new co-leader, Debbie Ngarewa-Packer, is putting her pou in the ground. He tau patu nui kei te haere, kei te mātakitaki koutou I a te hui. Pōti rua te kau, rua te kau. Karahui mai, I'm Mihi Ngarangi Forbes, and tonight the two leading candidates in Te Tai Hauāuru go head-to-head in our final Māori electorate debate. Now, this election, just over 34,000 Māori have registered to vote in Te Tai Hauāuru, and in 2017, 68.7% of registered voters made it to the polls. So let's meet the people whose names are on the ballot. They are Labour MP Adrian Rurafe and Māori Party co-leader Debbie Ngarewa-Packer. Tēnā kōrua.
Kia ora.
I'm going to start by asking each of you for your opening statements. Adrian, ka tīmata ki a koe.
Ka tira, tēnā rā tātou katoa. E tika ane kia tuku mihi atu ki a koutou, ngā whānau, ngā hapu me ngā iwi katoa puta no Te Tai Hauāuru. Nō reira, ka nui te mihi atu ki a koutou. It's an honour and privilege for me to be the Member of Parliament of Te Tai Hauāuru, but I take nothing for granted. I know that there are issues amongst all of you in Te Tai Hauāuru that are important to you. I think that over the past 3 years, Labour and government has addressed many of these issues to a high level and standard, and that we have more to do, we understand that. But I think we know that we have done enough to deserve a second term, and that's why I'm asking you for 2 ticks to vote for me to be your Member of Parliament in Te Tai Hauāuru, and to vote for the Labour Party to be the government and to make sure that your voice is at the table of the government. Kia ora mai tātou.
Tēnā koe, Debbie.
Tēnā koutou, ko Debbie Ngarewa-Packer hau, he uria au ngā tirunui, ngā ruihine, ngā rauru. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. My biggest fear as your candidate is that we are going to slip into an area, an administration, a government coming out of COVID, and is going to sit there and say, what we do is enough. If we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to get what we're getting. Racism, inequities, wakamā are taking our people out. They are holding us back from being who we really truly are capable of being. So my stand here is to actually be about challenging this government, challenging the big parties, working, yes, for sure, together on kaupapa we agree on, but making sure they never forget that as tangata whenua, we are unique. We need unique solutions. Now more than ever, we need a leadership that is courageous, that is going to go out there and fight for us, that is going to go out there and say what is right for us, that is going to go out and make sure we're not relegated to a dark corner and forgotten about. And that is who I stand for. I stand to make sure that our incomes, that our whānau, that our housing, that papatuanuku are going to be looked after so that our mokopuna can be the best that we want them to be. So I'm asking for your candidate vote. I'm asking to say and repeat what our people out there are saying. They want more Māori Te Tai Hauāuru voices, and that is exactly what I intend to do, be accountable to you and represent you the best that I possibly can. Kia ora rā.
Tēnā koe, ōtira, tēnā kōrua. Well, Te Tai Hauāuru is bigger than Belgium, and it's the second largest of the Māori electorates. It begins in Kāwhia, ends in Wellington, and it includes Porirua City. And that's where we sent Jodie Ihaka to see what's got folks talking.
What else do we like about our community?
Chickens.
Hey!
Chicken, fried chicken.
Kia ora, I'm Jodie Ihaka. Welcome to Te Tai Hauāuru. We're here talking to voters about what's up going into this election.
Majority of the problems are addictions.
Alcohol, drugs and stuff are in the community as well. Suicide is a massive thing.
The meth that is ruining the community.
But suicide is, it could be here. Someone could be here right now that's having that thought.
This store is called Free for All.
You pay $3, you take whatever you want, as much as you want.
So I work at the pub just around the corner, and a lot of people just spend thousands on gambling. They're taking loans out just to gamble.
You know, we get a lot of people out of whakamā to come in, but we take them in, we make them feel comfortable. You know, it's not really shameful to be in here in the second-hand shop. We shut the doors yesterday for the last time at 4 o'clock, and it's been a bit sad for all of us. And for my manager to be waking up to this, it's pretty sad. I just hope that the person that did it learns from their mistakes.
Every race in our country is supposed to have the opportunity to be successful. We definitely need a bit more tautokoing and a bit more support there, but you know, as long as we're looking at the playing field and it's looking rather even, then you know, I suppose that's all we can ask.
Up with lollies.
We could have those the Māori wardens.
I'm kind of picking you don't want more cops on the street around here, but would you be open to Māori wardens?
Yep.
I struggled with addiction, so, you know, I'm still recovering.
I wish there was more kōhangas out there, you know, so we've only got one here in the bay, we could add 2 or 3.
I mean, living with addiction, I lost the kids and everything, so, sorry.
Politic world, right? It's all to do with politics, but if they do come down into the communities and see the groundwork, that a lot of the kids are struggling, a lot of the families are struggling, to get down there and see what they're actually going through, because once they are down there, they can actually see what needs to be worked on.
Sober, don't gamble, and I just stay home, get the kids every weekend, so it's helpful.
Does this damage here mean it's the end of your service?
No, not by a long shot.
So I've learned today the big problems are addiction, suicide and crime. So what are you going to do about it?
Let's start with you, Adrian.
Kia ora. Last year we invested $1.7 billion into mental health. Addiction is a serious issue and it's one that we need to take seriously. I think that the program that we've put together, a 5-year program, which has only just begun to roll out, it's going to take all of that 5 years to completely roll out. I visited with the Ngāti Toa Māori wardens only the other day, and big mihi out to Waitangi and Matua Roli and all of the work that they do in that community are making it a safer place. But we've got to deal with the underlying issues as well, like housing, and that's why we've built 74 houses on Castor Crescent, and we've got plans to build more. We've gone into an agreement with Ngāti Toa Rangatira for them to manage 900 houses, which only kicked off the other day, and they've set up Te Ahuru Mōwai, and so those are the kinds of kaupapa that we're supporting.
Kapai, we're going to come back to housing and addiction, but Deb, I'm going to give you an opportunity to answer that pātai.
Yeah, kia ora. Look, I recognise that Adrian thinks that the government are working really hard. From our perspective, it's not hard enough. And certainly what we can see is that, yes, there's been money put into systems, but it's often lost in bureaucracy. It's not hitting the very ground where it needs to. So from our perspective, it is about making sure that we are funding and resourcing the very targeted community and services and providers that are working with our whānau on the ground. It is about also addressing the wider aspect of, you know, we have clinicians and mental health services that aren't designed around our culture. And I guess that's the biggest issue that we sort of see as Te Pāti Māori, is challenging this whakaaro that what we're doing is enough when it simply isn't, and making sure that we're imploring that we take the perspective from what would work for us as Māori. So a Māori-centric solution is what we're proposing.
Kapai, I'm going to come in there and talk about addiction services, because there was a lot of concern there about people in their community. Like you said, 1.9 billion this government has committed to mental health. You know, we're told 450 million of that is dedicated to mental health addictions. In Te Tai Hauāuru, there's 8 to 9 social services. How much are they getting of the budget?
I haven't got that figure off the top of my head, but what I do know is that across the board, across the entire...
Just a roundabout?
No, I don't want to guess. But what I do know is that there are Māori organisations, there are non-Māori organisations as well, offering services to Māori across the entire electorate. It would be wrong of me to say that it's confined to this amount. What I do know is that there is a huge issue that didn't arrive here 3 years ago. And so I challenge the Māori Party and their relationship with the National Party, and for 9 years they voted for 9 budgets of the National Party that failed to address that issue. We've put in a huge amount of money. I'm going to come on that and give you an opportunity, because we spoke to a woman who works in this area there. She says it's the money trickles down from the MOE to DHB to providers, and then they have to impress the funders with proposals and the rest of it. They don't often have a lot of capacity in their teams. It sounds problematic. Are we looking at this the wrong way? Well, of course we're looking at it the wrong way, and I think it's just too lazy to deflect on who did what wrong. We need to focus on the future, and this is about, you know, manifesting the past and looking at what we can do together. I'm and have been part of Te Ora. I'm part of an organisation that has 10,500 that we look after, and what we are seeing is, again, contracts and a transactional relationship and expectation for us as Māori, and that's actually not working for our whānau. So our perspective from our policy is actually saying we need to lead our solutions. We need to resource those on the ground, and we need to make sure that we don't get in the way and try and pretend the state knows what's best for us, because it quite clearly hasn't. We've tried it this way for 180 years. Was it any better when the Māori Party was last in? To be really honest, I think that we've probably done some things great and some things actually we've learnt from in hindsight, and hindsight's always a beautiful thing. But what it means for us, and the manifestation of learning about that, is that we actually have to, there is not an excuse for us to say, okay, I'm going to come to Adrian just really quickly. Who in your caucus is holding the Ministry of Health to account in terms of the spend? The entire Māori caucus does on Māori issues. You can't tell me the number. You can't tell me how much. Oh, well, I'll give you an example of the difficulty of getting to that number. We've got a number of DHBs across the area, so I can give you the figures for Waikato, but only part of in South Waikato is part of Te Tai Hauāuru. So you're asking me to deliver you a figure where we've got 19 district councils. We've got. It's not that easy. So it's really difficult. We're going to have to go. If I can say with respect, one of the things that we're proposing is flipping the model upside down and saying a whānau first health card is where we empower our whānau to choose these services and what will work with them. So we've got to look at it differently. We're going to come back to that kind of that kaupapa soon. Deeper and more illuminating than the Waitomo case. Stay with us, hui hoppers. Ka hoki mai te hui a konei. You're watching the Hui Pōti 2020, the tug of war for Te Tai Hauāuru.
Property managers in Whanganui and New Plymouth are reporting a surge in house sales and a hike in prices. So while it's great to see New Zealanders returning home, it takes a toll on the haukainga who are renting. We need more housing stock, that's not in dispute. But while we wait for the stock to be built, how do we deal with what we've got? Just I want a commitment from you both. Will you commit to not selling any more housing stock?
Yes, the last government sold 6,000 state houses and we've built 6,400 and committed to 8,000 more.
So if you were to come into Parliament, you'd commit to that?
Yes, we commit to that, and we'll make sure that those that are renting have safe and warm homes as well.
For many homeowners, Adrian, home ownership is not an option and renting will be for life. So how can we ensure fairness in there?
Well, there's a couple of things that we're doing. One of them is progressive home ownership, in other words, rent to buy. Once that gets going, I would expect that we would scale that up to make it more available. The other side to the issue is making certain that people can afford them, and the way that we do that is to raise wages. So, we've...
Any idea of how many rent to buy benefits? Any idea how many people rent to buy? The idea of rent to buy would benefit?
It hasn't started
like roundabout
to roll out.
I mean, there's some suggestion that you actually can't rent to buy unless you can almost get a deposit.
Well, the issue there is that a lot of our people are paying rentals at the amount that they would actually pay a mortgage, but they can't afford the deposit. So this is a scheme which enables them, after a period of time that they've been in a house, to be able to actually own their own home by turning that rent
Let's
from
talk
rent
about
to...
that. In Whanganui, the medium house price has risen by, it was 2,700 10 years ago. Today it's 415,000. Landlords are making really good equity and also have the option to increase rents each year. Is that fair, Deb?
No,
Would you make it tighter?
Not fair. No, and unlike my esteemed whanaunga, we actually come with transformational solutions. Part of the reason why we have housing issues, is, other than supply, is that our whānau can't afford. So we have come up with a very progressive incomes policy that makes sure we lift wages up to a living rate, and make sure that we have our whanaunga who were unemployed pre-COVID getting double what those in COVID have gotten. The other side is that we actually believe there should be a capital gains tax so that we can actually address the supply. And we also think that it's really important to have a rental freeze, especially while we're taking order from if we were to do this from a tiriti-led process as tiriti partners, there's no way that we'd be dealing with the situation. And I think it's really important that we look at the wider issues of why we are having a housing problem. We need to address the inequities, and that starts with income. We have to have a very sharp income policy.
So capital gains there.
Absolutely.
Adrian, wouldn't a capital gains on a second house solve the issue in Whanganui?
We've decided not to have a capital gains tax this time. We've campaigned on it before, and it's clear that the people of New Zealand don't actually want one, so we're not going to do that.
That's fine, but it means that you must be happy then and content with the fact that landlords get to raise the rent every year and basically
the Māori Party can promise whatever they like, but the missing part to this conversation is actually the National Party. So we're going to either have a Labour-led government or a National-led government. Yes, we are. That's a reality, and the Māori Party sat with a National Party for 9 years.
But the Māori Party is ruling that out this time.
And so they can have, $34 billion
to sit there and go backwards like that. And we can sit there and talk about Rogernomics, we can sit there and talk about the fortune seabed. But actually, we're not in a position to be that lazy. We have to be progressive. There's a sense of immediacy, and we don't have the luxury to be chucking off at each other. We have to work together and show leadership.
But we have to be realistic with what we want.
Yeah, but I also think it's okay to have transformational policies.
So let me just clear that up.
That National won't let you do, so you've got to be fair.
I'll just clear it up.
You should ask National
Adrian, I'm just going to clear that up. Will you go with the National Party?
Oh, absolutely not. And I think everyone knows that. We've had that again.
I'm sorry, but their constitution doesn't let them do that. They have to give that to their members.
Well, Adrian, you were a part of that constitution. You helped write that for us as Māori Party, so you know.
That's right.
So it's okay to
when I hear it,
so Adrian,
members like
Adrian, how is the government...
I might believe it, but until then I won't.
How is the government working with iwi to utilise whenua Māori to assist whānau, to fast-track builds?
Can you repeat that?
How is your government working with iwi to utilise, Māori land to enable them to build?
We've put a significant amount of money into Māori land and to make sure that we can develop that land. So over $100 million out of the Provincial Growth Fund. We've also had 2 pieces of legislation to make certain out of a suite of 3, so there's another one coming, to make it easier for whānau to manage their lands that they own and to make sure that it's more productive. So those are things that we can do.
Ka pai. Debbie, the last Māori Party had a go at Te Turi Whenua Māori reform. Will you have another go?
No, it's not on our radar, and it's nothing that we've heard in the beauty of being out of government is we've been able to reconnect, and it's definitely not on our radar at the moment.
So the idea of, utilising whenua Māori to build papakainga and those kinds of things, what are some of the ideas from the Māori Party?
Well, so we actually think that we need to remove the barriers. So we know in Te Tai Hauāuru there is land available, and we know that our whānau are desperate to be able to connect to their whenua and actually come together and connect to each other. So our policy is actually about removing those barriers and about creating finance that are based on the chattels versus the land. Again, they are transformational whakaaro and transformational policy, but this is the time for it. This is the time for us to be brave and endearing.
Ka pai, tēnā kōrua, more electrifying than Taimaranui's 2 power bills. Nō reira, e hoa mā kia tonu mai rā. Kei te mātakitaki koutou I a te hui. Tonight, the 2 leading candidates in Te Tai Hauāuru are vying for the hearts and minds of the electorate. They are, of course, Labour MP Adrian Rurāwhi and Māori Party co-leader Debbie Ngarewa-Packer. Kia tahuri aki tātou ki te pātai tuatahi no Te Tai Hauāuru.
Kia ora, my name is Marvin Karawana and I work in the events industry. Recently we've had a lot of cancellations, which has made running the business very tough. So my question to you is, what are you going to do once the COVID cash dries up to support small to medium-sized businesses?
Supporting small business there, that was the pātai, Debbie. What are some of the ideas you're going to do when the COVID cash, as he says, dries up?
Look, I had my first business at 23 years old, so I understand what it is our small, medium businesses are dealing with. I think, first of all, we believe that it's really critical to be able to continue subsidies for our small businesses and make sure that we're able to, one, our income policy will bring about a stimulus and have more people buying from them, but also address the fact how critical they are. We want to be able to also identify some of the solutions as far as digital. We saw digital malls going up during COVID. So I think it's really important that while the cash may dry up, it should dry up for the big organisations, but actually our small to medium ones, as He Kaikaikaringa identified, need to be focused on. We also need to make sure that we have about the support network for them to prescribe to, so that actually that becomes the channel that we're able to build the solutions from and not assume we know it all. From what we can see, that some of our most innovative businesses are our small to medium-sized ones. So we don't think the cash should dry up per se. We actually think they're going to need continued tautoko and actually adjust that tautoko and pivot as they require as well.
Ka pai, Adrian.
It's really important that we support small to medium businesses, and we'll do that both from a Māori lens as well as generally. And so we've got the interest-free loans that we will extend if we're lucky enough to be elected into government, from 1 year interest-free to 2 years interest-free. I want to talk about Hoko Hoko, which is an online site of Te Tai Hauāuru Māori businesses that Te Puni Kōkiri supported to get them online. So, you know, we're doing those sorts of things to make it accessible to all people, not only in Te Tai Hauāuru but around the country and internationally as well. So those are the kinds of things we support.
Ka pai, that kind of takes care of, you know, our man there who's got his own business there, and, you know, maybe whānau at home who are doing crafts and those kinds of things. But Taranaki has the highest unemployment rate for Māori across the country, 10.3%. Can you give me one idea, you know, in this, which sector, you know, where you could create jobs, Adrian?
Yeah, well, we've set up a just transition in the energy sector. So we set up Ara Ake, so our National New Energy Development Centre. We've invested in new energy because it's really important that we phase out fossil fuels. And of course, Taranaki is really important in that particular industry. But we can't just wipe out an entire industry without investing in alternatives. So we've done things like invested in setting up a network of hydrogen refuelling for heavy vehicles. In Mokai, Tuarupaki will start producing hydrogen at the end of this year. So, you know, we're investing in all of those sorts of things, and through that, as well as our shovel-ready projects that we're funding, one of them in particular that was about jobs and not education. However, it has become the narrative around that particular one, but it really is about jobs.
Deb, in this COVID climate, does the traditional business model need reworking? We saw there, what about the volunteers like Māori wardens? They're assets to our community, but, you know, they're barely paid. They're paid peanuts.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that I think the first question you asked is, should we be returning to what we were doing pre-COVID? And my absolute answer is, heck no, never do, because it wasn't working for us beforehand. I think when we talk about our volunteers and those that are out there, not just in Māori Warden, but looking after our awa, looking after our tuna, looking after our maunga, and I can name you a hoot of other entrepreneurs and opportunities. In our climate change policy, unlike Labour, we're very, very proactive and in tune with what Taranaki Māori want. So we're proposing that actually we focus our investment on actually creating jobs around our actual communities. So that is about creating an economy around cleaning and rejuvenating our waterways. That is about creating an economy around looking after as kaitiaki of our maunga. And we know that that's happening and it could happen better. The other side of it is, and I do want to pick up with what Adrian has said, you know, this environmental disaster that we're coming upon with Papatūnuku being in trouble is because we have not been endearing enough to actually stop the drilling, the seabed mining and the absolute desecration that's happening to our whenua. And this is a kaupapa I can talk on for hours, but I won't, because we live it. There are not the jobs for Māori that people promise. And the other side of that is that it takes away our kai and our ability to look after ourselves for generations. So we don't believe that this is the solution.
But Labor had some of the lowest unemployment rates before COVID happened. I'm going to come to Adrian and give him an opportunity to respond to that. Like as you said, you can't just move away from the primary industry in Taranaki.
The issue is, of course, we banned seabed mining, so we won't be permitting that. However,
that's not correct.
Let me finish.
No, that's not correct.
However, we have to uphold previous decisions and permits that were issued. So otherwise, it would bankrupt our country. So that's a 30-year framework. Now, interestingly,
you've banned new seabed.
No, they've banned offshore drilling, not seabed mining.
We have banned, we won't be issuing permits. So the stuff that Debbie's talking about, 9 years in a national government actually created that framework. And so they should own it. They should, that's fine. And we should own it too.
Yes,
absolutely.
That's right.
And you should own what you did, your party did with 9 years in national.
Hang on a minute. I haven't seen your party come and support. I haven't seen you show up when we've been in the seabed mining courts. I haven't seen a single one of you turn up and support us when we've been fighting for 7-8 years. So you could sit there and blame that previous government, absolutely. But where have you been when we've been in court? Where have you been when we tried to stop the block office, which you supported Megan Wood's doing? So
it's getting louder than our Rātana brass band in January. Nō reira, kia mau tonu mai rā. Tahuti mai anō ki te hui pōti ruatakau. Time to take a look at our next pātai from te Tai Hauāuru.
Tēnā tātou whānau mā, ko Ngaraiti Tangaroa Smith, taku nei ingoa. My kōrero is around unity and diversity. We live in a multicultural society with a lot of people who come from different walks of life. However, not all of us are seen as equal. We see it across the board in terms of national statistics. Māori have the worst rate of domestic violence, suicide, all these other horrible things that are going on with our people. My pātai is, what policies is your party willing to implement which honours te tiriti o Waitangi and ensures that the Māori people won't be left behind?
Debbie.
Kia ora, pai te pātai. So we're really proud it is Te Pāti Māori that we have brought our mana motahake policy, and it is about taking on the fact that from our perspective it is about te ao Māori. From our perspective everything starts at the tiriti, and I think there's a real drive, and we see that from our rangatahi as well, is about addressing the inequities. Our policy is about saying things like, we should have as Māori first right of refusal on private land. It is also addressing, and our rangatahi was saying, is that we want to make sure that we never have to defend our uniqueness, so that our position, our setting is always going to be from the party that didn't give and didn't cede any sovereignty, that does believe tino rangatiratanga is happening and should happen. And so it is about holding every government to task. We also, in this policy, are saying that we believe the tribunal should be an independent commission that holds the Crown to task on how it's performing and how it's implementing our treaty as far in a contemporary sense, and also it is bound to hold up all the recommendations of the tribunal. So those are some of the ways and that we want to address it. But what we don't do is ignore that there are issues and ignore the racism that is plaguing and holding our people back from being who they can be.
Adrian, what are some of the policies that Labour has implemented that will make change?
I think overall, I've got to say that having a strong Labour Māori caucus is that we're able to put a Māori lens over every decision. I mean, it's and I do acknowledge the Māori Party because they did that for 9 years with National. It's really the same. The issue around sovereignty and and treaty rights and everything, whether you believe we ceded it, it was assumed, or it was stolen off us. The reality is today we don't have it. And so in order for us to move forward, we have to take the whole population with us. So one of the biggest policy areas that I would point to is history in schools. We need to make sure that future generations actually know the real history of this country, and that is the only way that we are going to progress treaty issues properly. We'll do all of the treaty settlement issues. We've set up te ara whiti, all of those things to make certain that the Māori voice is there. But, long term, we need transformation amongst all other people.
That's a fair point, isn't it? History in schools is really going to change the way that Pākehā New Zealand Māori as well know our history, and hopefully it changes the way that Ngā Raiti feels about his place in society. Yeah,
I mean, Labour's leveraging off a lot of Māori Party policies that my whanaunga is knocking the very party that they're using. Te Pūtake o Te Riri, for example. Tai Hauāuru, for example, they haven't come up with anything fresh and innovative for Māori since they got in. He wanoa, but really, are we going to have the funding debate? Because you can put money into everything you want, but if you haven't got that treaty relationship right, if that official, if that government department doesn't recognise our uniqueness, the money goes into an empty hole and doesn't deliver for us. That's why it's fundamental that we get the principles of the treaty and done at the very start. And we can't, Mātaki Mai talks about the constitutional change we're having. So we're aspirational. We absolutely do not accept that is not the position that we should be thriving and striving through. We don't accept that we have a government or a party in place that pronounces as saying, I have the most Māori, hua noa, I don't recognise our treaty rights or uniqueness. No, that's key to hear.
I'm going to shift to the King Country now. Whānau in the King Country are living in energy hardship. Unlike you and I, they have two power bills, one for the power and one for the lines. This government promised relief, but that review hasn't brought any. Why not, Adrian?
I think it's, and I'll own up to that. It's been a difficult area for us to deal with. We are in a coalition arrangement and we can't always get what we want. I know in order for us to get there, we actually need 61 votes.
Yes, but I've got to say, Winston Peters, he actually went to Taumarunui on the last election trail and promised them that. So that's right. Was it the Greens?
No, it was my understanding there were difficulties in coming to agreement amongst all of the parties. So you've got to remember there's two parts to the equation, the supply, and so that's a business that needs to make its money.
So in the meantime, whānau are still paying two bills down there, and they're paying the Waitomo rates hike as well. What do we do?
Well, first of all, and certainly when I become MP, I would be in there batting for our whānau and fighting and turning up. What we do need to do is actually transition a lot of our whānau out of the monopoly of these electricity companies and into a solar system, a solar panel system that is actually going to get them the kind of living costs that they can afford. And I think that's the first thing we've got to do. But it's really disconcerting because 1 minute it's the old parties that were in place's fault, and the next minute it's the coalition. We We just have to turn up and fight for our whānau. That's what we have to do, and that's certainly what I would propose to do.
Well, I know that Tari Anaturia for 9 years fought for it as well.
Yeah, but Waitangi is the sort of person that would turn up and fight for our people. And this is about you and I, Adrian. This is about our
here's a scenario. Here's a scenario.
But we do have to focus on the future.
What this government says, because they are putting $24 million into the solar panels on homes, it's a pilot scheme, and what about WINS? Could WINS give an extra energy subsidy just to those living in the King Country so, we can acknowledge the inequity there? Is that a possibility?
Well, we did double the winter energy.
Yeah, but Bob Jones gets the same as somebody living in the King Country.
Yeah. But I mean, it's still for that purpose.
But it's inequitable. It's not fair. So could we give them some more? Could we give them a King Country
with means testing is that the means testing would cost more than the savings that you'd make.
It's not means tested though, is it?
Yeah, no, that's right. And the problem with if you did means test it, the cost of means testing it would cost more than the money that you would save.
What about regional? What about regional testing? Because that would help.
Well, that may very well, but again, there'd be a cost to having a regional separation.
But that's an idea, isn't it? It's an idea.
Well,
so
everyone would
have you got one?
Everyone would love to have a regional exception.
But these people are not getting the same.
But here's the thing: they're getting a lot more than they were before.
Oh, look, I just think we need to front foot inequities. That's it. We just need to front foot inequities and make our people's lives easier so that they can be well, so that they can live in homes.
So just quickly, to the people of the King Country who are paying £2 power bills, how would you relieve their suffering, their energy suffering, if you like?
Well, the same way that we relieve everyone else that's been suffering, and that is actually to bring about some support until we actually transition them out of that process. And this is the problem. This is the problem when we have companies like that hold us to ransom. Transition them out, but provide some support to get to that.
Kia ora. More views than Mount Taranaki and more excitement than a trip to Bulls. Ka hoki mai te hui a konei. Tahuti mai anō ki te wāhanga whakamutunga o te taupatupatu mo te Tai Hauāuru. Well, you've said, Adrian, you only want to return to Parliament on the mana of this seat. What does that mean?
Well, I come from Ratana Pā, and uana hau ki ngā kupu waihotanga o tahu Pōtiki Wiremu. Ratana, ka wawa hi au taku tinana ki ngā whā ngā kōata, arepa o me ka piriwiri tua hāmuera, and that's where I stand.
But you're on the list, so is that for just in cases?
Well, we're both on our respective lists. I mean, Debbie is number 1 on her list. I'm number 24 on ours. All they need to do is increase their party vote by 3.5%, and they're in, all of them. You know, that's, I'm shocked that they don't believe that they can get there. I thought they believed in themselves. So, you know, it's a two-way street. I want the mandate from the people to represent them, and I believe I've done a huge amount for the electorate and made huge gains.
Kapa, you're wanting 2 ticks. You're actually doing the Get 2 for 1. That's your campaign. I've heard you talk about it. Why? I mean, you know, do you understand that he wants to be there on the mana of his seat, and what's your response to that?
Yeah, look, it's not for me to comment on Adrian's strategy and his whakaaro, and I understand the mamae because I'm challenging and standing, but this isn't for any other reason than the fact that I believe that we need to have a voice that is unapologetically tangata whenua, and our starting basis from the basis that we are the tiriti partner and we have a relationship that needs to be honoured, as do our mokopuna. So, you know, my perspective is, and certainly what we're hearing, 50% of those polled from 6 of us candidates in Māori television have said they want a Māori Party Labour relationship in going forward. People that I'm talking to, and there's been thousands that we've been engaging with, are saying they want to have more Māori te Tai Hauāuru voices, not more Māori voices, more Māori from te Tai Hauāuru in government and in Parliament. So that's certainly my footing. I wouldn't be standing in this position if I didn't think that, one, I had support and I was able to make that critical difference and be that voice that holds the big parties to task when they lose faith in what we need as Māori.
Do you buy that, Adrian?
No, not at all. I think each candidate should stand on their own mana and represent the seat as best as they can. And if the people choose you, they choose me again, I'll be honoured to represent them. But I don't think, you know, the strategy that the Māori Party is using is to ask Labour Party voters to not vote for their candidate. And you know, that's okay, but...
We're not asking Labour, we're asking Māori. We're asking Māori, and I think, you know, Adrian has a lot to say about the Māori Party, you know, political strategy and campaign strategy. And, you know, the reality is we're not asking anyone but our whānau, and our whānau will determine the mana. They will decide who they back.
And they'll also want to know where you're voting on the referendum, so let's go to that. On euthanasia, Debbie, would you vote in favour of end life legislation?
No, we don't, tautoko as a party. There are too many disparities and too many concerns, and particularly given the inequities that we still live with as Māori, so no.
And Adrian?
Yeah, even if you supported euthanasia, this is not the act to do it. There are too many vulnerabilities within it. I voted against the bill and I will be voting against the referendum.
And on the referendum, to legalise cannabis, where do you stand there?
I voted in favour of the referendum simply because addiction is too difficult for our people, and we need a health response, not a criminal response to it. And so it's, you know, I look forward to the bill going through the House because I think it can be improved, but there are strong protections in there as well.
And Debbie?
Yes, no, tautoko. I mean, we also believe there needs to be some strong protections put in place. So we're in support of the legalisation of cannabis. And it is really critical that we stop our whānau being affected because of the criminalisation of it, and that we address it from a health perspective and the health that we need to provide in tautoko for our whānau.
Is this an opportunity, do you think, to, you know, really to change the tide in the way that our rangatahi and our people are dealt with in corrections?
Well, I live in hope because the overseas experience tells us that when you regulate to this length, the usage amongst young people in particular actually goes down. We also need to have a different focus within the criminal justice system to make certain that we have fair and equitable outcomes for Māoris, like changing the whole correction system.
Great answer, and I just want to ask you a question. Do you support or respect, or do you think the Prime Minister should actually say where she's voting on cannabis?
Look, it's up to... No, this referendum is one where every single person's vote counts the same.
10 seconds left. Do you think the
Yes, I
Prime
do.
Minister
I think every leader in a political
cards?
position like that should actually let the people know where they're thinking.
Ka pai. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. Thanks for joining us tonight, Hui Hoppers. That's the last of our debate series, but we'll be back 9:30 on Sunday morning with a very special interview with Winston Peters. And remember, whānau, if you're not enrolled to vote, you still have time. You can do it online at vote.nz. To conclude our tau patu, we've given rangatahi the last word, anei ngā hine pū kōrero with activist, and a special mihi to Nathaniel Howell and the folks at Māori Media for sharing this with us. Nohoro maira.
Our birth is our very first act of resistance. And we were born screaming. With centuries of injustice running through our veins, we emerge from our mothers' bodies with a battle cry.
We learn how to march with our ancestors' names wrapped around our throats. But over time, we unlearn the value of our tongues.
Every part of us so colonized, we forget our own names.
They started by taking the whenua as if it wasn't part of our people.
The land wars were an attempted genocide, but our schools won't even teach us that. The society was built on the backs of forgotten tūpapaku, and it spits on their graves every time we are failed by the Pākehā system. So teach us our stories.
Teach us a history of voyages for more than a term.
Give lessons of traditions long forgotten.
Tikanga cannot be learned in a matter of days.
We are Māori every single second.
I've never been a stranger to fighting, breaking the silence for everyone who has been forced to stay within it.
Can you hear the sound of our ancestors rising up every time we speak?
Their core lives within us. You can erase them from our textbooks, but their resilience is passed down in our blood. Every dream they had is planted in our chest.
Ko mātou te whakatina na tanga o rātou wawata. We are the descendants of their greatness. We follow in their steps, place our feet in the footprints of their legacies. We are generations of activism in the flesh, bodies woven together on the front line.
We are voices raised, proof of intergenerational power.
This is more than protest. This is mana motuhake.
The stories that you tell your children will be of the uprising,
of the people who overturn Pākehā palms like hurricane, like tidal wave,
like earthquake.
We are groundbreaking.
Shake the whenua for the pennies you left buried in the soil.
We will continue our hikoi, walk across the land that our tupuna have learned to love from afar.
We will tear down the systems that were made to tear down our people. We will not sit by and watch. It is not in our blood to do nothing. We are the mouth you cannot silence, the back you will not break. You tried to bury the voices of our ancestors, but grew us instead. One fist raised, one hand held. Ka whawhai tonu mātou, moa ke tonu atu.
Whakarongo, tautoko, whakarongo, tautoko.
He mea tautoko na te manga.
The Hui is made with support from New Zealand On Air.